I feel women tend to treat people as they would want to be treated, not necessarily treat everyone as I would like to be treated. When I first started in my career, I would always say, I'm just going to work really hard and I'm going to get recognized for my hard work. But the reality is that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I feel like women have the ability to do that. And also, because we are mothers, we have careers, we own our own businesses, one of the things women do really well is multitask.
Everyone, we are joined today with Carolina Ramos. She is the Regional General Manager of Rock Hill Management. She oversees the tri-state and greater Northeast area. She's the head of property management and construction for this incredible company. They do both commercial and residential. Though her specialization is in commercial, she can also throw her hat into the ring for residential as well, and has for Rock Hill. This is a national portfolio. They have real estate throughout the United States, and they have almost 50 million square feet within their portfolio. We're joined here today. Thank you so much, Carolina, for joining us. As you know, we are here to ask you all of the important questions of executive women who are working in commercial real estate and property management. Though Rock Hill, to its credit, have so many incredible female leaders, I know that we know in this industry, we look up, and the higher up you go, the more one-dimensional it starts to look. And so for the women who have transcended, who are up there, who are getting up there, it's a pleasure and honor to sit down with you and to ask you those questions of how'd you do it? How on earth did you do it? Because we all want to know. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Alessia. This is, it's an honor to be here. And if there's anything that I can do to support other professional women in the industry, I'm happy to do that. Your question, it's a complex answer, really. I mean, it's not easy to be in a male-dominated industry as a female. It does take a lot of hard work and dedication, but you also have to seize the opportunity. Don't settle. You want to have your eyes open and just keep your ear on the street to see what's happening around you. A lot of companies try to pigeonhole you because you're really good at, your job, and they don't want to promote you because then they'd have to find a replacement for you. You have to kind of identify those things within your own corporation and see how, they're willing to support your career path.
We're going to get to that very thing later on in this interview. Ooh, I love it. I'm chomping at the bit. Before we dig in, why don't you tell me, how did you get into commercial real estate?
So it kind of just happened. I was working, 20 years old in a building who had just been purchased by Taconic Investment Partners, and they were looking to sack the building. I was working for a tenant in the property. I had my ears out to see if there's anything happening, and I applied for a position, and I was hired as the property administrator. My first building was 450 Park Avenue, and that's when I fell in love with property management. In all honesty, I love the complexity. I love the fact that real estate keeps you on your feet. You could have a plan of what you're going to do when you get into your building, but everything can change as you flip into work. And you have to just pivot. You have to react. You have to think about what the best solutions are. And I love being challenged.
That's really good. So why don't you tell me, you're here, you overseeing tri-state greater Northeast area, buildings, managers, all the moving and shaking. How'd you get there? From starting out at 450 Park, what was that career path for you up to this point?
Well, once I had my feet on the ground at 450, I realized this is where my career should start. But ultimately, I had big dreams, and I felt like I really needed to understand foundationally how to manage a building from a construction aspect, a mechanical aspect, an operations aspect. So I wanted to get as much knowledge and be as well-rounded as I could. So what I did was I stayed at Chronic at 450 Park for 5 years, and then I pivoted to focus on property accountant role. so that I can learn the finance side. And I took on some roles with Heinz and with Snacklo. And ultimately, I was hired as a controller for JLL. And then within JLL, I took on more operational roles and oversight on construction projects and property management, which then led me to manage my own building. And then once I really had a good grasp on building management, I then transitioned into portfolio management, which is what I'm doing now.
Did you know that only 11% of C-suite across our nation are women? If you want to see change, subscribe to the podcast, comment below, and get involved. Donate now at aliciaallan-vanderbilt.org. First link in the description below. And the thing I like about hearing your path is how it wasn't a singular path, right? It was, I'm going to do this and try this and try this and try this. And you kept pivoting and moving into different things with the larger goal in mind. And that's really valuable. That's awesome. Thank you so much. What are the risks that you took in your career? Which ones out of those risks do you feel worked out, and which ones didn't work out the way that you thought?
So I do tend to be a risk taker. I don't like to settle, and I can quickly identify whether the company that I'm working for is a good fit for me and where I want to take my career. But I also understand that sometimes you have to take one step back to take 2 or 3 steps forward. So initially, when I started my career and kind of got involved on the accounting side, I knew that was going to set me up for something greater. But when I started transitioning into different assets and learning, the difference between Class A, the difference between Class B and C, and different infrastructures in the building, different owners, right? You can work for a third party, you can work for a hedge fund, a bank, and everybody has different goals for those assets. Yeah. So for me, I found that pivoting and transitioning into some of those roles had challenges. Sometimes you work for an owner operator that is just very stuck in their ways, and they don't really want the portfolio to advance into a more sustainable portfolio or technologically advanced portfolio. And so you can make recommendations, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that are making the decision. So at some point in my career, I felt a little bit stagnant because I wasn't able to make the progress that I was hired to make when I started that position. So I always had the goal that even if I am taking an opportunity that seemed to work but didn't, I have to take the positive out of every experience, and then I could utilize that for my next opportunity, which I have, and I think that's been successful for me.
That's good. That's really good. What do you think women offer in the workplace as leaders that outshine their male counterparts?
So I would have to say, and this obviously isn't the case, every time, right? But I think women have the ability to be very nurturing and understanding, having to manage and deal with a lot of different personalities. So I feel women tend to treat people as they would want to be treated, not necessarily treat everyone as I would like to be treated, because we all have different needs and different requirements. And I think women tend to be a little bit more sensitive to that. And one of the biggest parts of what we do is manage people. We manage our vendors, we manage our employees, we manage our clients and our tenants. We can't always look at those relationships from, one point of view, which is the way we feel, the way we would want things. We have to look at it from their perspective. What are their needs? What do they want? What are their expectations? I feel like women have the ability to do that. And also, because we are mothers, we have careers, we own our own businesses, there's so many layers, right? And one of the things women do really well is multitask. Yeah. We do it every day without even thinking about it. Because if we don't, we cannot possibly accomplish all the goals and all of the, we can't check off the to-do list, basically. So I think those two things are, one of our strongest.
Yeah, you really hit on a couple things because, as someone who was in property management for many years, I think that's the key thing to being successful or unsuccessful is how good are you with people? How good are you with people? And that will make or break you in this particular job and in this particular field because and how good are you with a multitude of personalities, right? How good are you, especially the difficult ones? Ooh, that's spicy, right? So, and I worked one of my first buildings was I had 125 jewelry tenants in the Diamond District. So,
Fun.
talk about it was a baptism by fire, but it kind of gives you a scope for what it takes to be good in this industry. And that's another thing you touched on is, this is a job and an industry where you do have to be able to multitask. You have to be able to jump from construction to accounting, blend them. There's an issue with security, and then there's a tenant and a lease negotiation, space viewing, and then you're trying to oversee the finances of the asset. Is there an ROI? And it's just so much. And I think it's one of the strengths of this as a career for people who like that kind of a thing. And I do agree. I think women are far better at both of those things, are just very, very good at kind of like jumping from one to the other, to the other, to the other, and doing it beautifully and seamlessly. So that was awesome. What do you think helped you stand out when you're moving up and being considered for more senior leadership roles?
I would say that the fact that I had experience with accounting, finance, construction, it kind of, it kind of set me apart from everyone else who maybe just had a construction background or just had operations and not the finance. So I feel like the fact that I did take on these roles that kind of concentrated on these departments, and I feel like that helped me to have more of a background where I could utilize my skills, in many different ways. I can oversee construction. I can operationally, I know how to run a building. I know the finance. I was a controller. So that was my life with, the book, the escalation, and on the leasing side as well, where, I have to negotiate leases and terms and work with our heads of, our department heads like risk management and legal. I think that having that background in so many different areas made me stand out from some of the others.
Thing I like about that is that when we tie that back to your career trajectory, how you strategically chose another maneuver and another role to get that under your belt, to get the next thing under your belt. So it's really awesome. I love that. Okay, this one's one of the hottest ones. How on earth do you balance work, kids, relationships, marriages, family? God forbid you have an aging parent. How do you balance that while at the same time going up a ladder and being on an upward trajectory into executive roles? Because if there's one thing especially for people who are just starting out in the industry, newsflash, the higher up you go, the more work there is. You don't get up to the top and you have to take on more. And so, how do you do that? How do you take on more work, more responsibility, and balance all of the other fulfilling life things that there are, life demands? I must know.
So it's so funny that you just made that comment about role, higher responsibility. I can't tell you how many people I speak to that have the opposite opinion and say, well, you're at this level. Why are you still dealing with the minutia? And I say, when you're at this level, you have more oversight into everything and more responsibility. So I have to work harder, have more work than I did before. And, it's the bigger the portfolio, the bigger the team, the more responsibility you have. It is extremely challenging. I have two beautiful daughters, a wonderful husband. I'm the planner. I am the person that sets up all the appointments. I'm the one that takes care of the finances, everything that we need at home. And I have my job and my kids. It is extremely challenging. I would say that to my earlier point, the fact that women are able to pivot, we have that ability to just make things work and make things happen very seamlessly. I find myself, if I have what people would call downtime, which is not really downtime, I I'm always filling those holes with something else that I have to do, right? So I think that one of the reasons why I've been successful in navigating through, all of these challenges is that, I have a really good support system. I've built a great team. I'm very careful about who I hire on my team just to make sure that we have the right personalities that jive with each other, because if you have the right team in place, things will work more like clockwork. So having a really good team is, half the battle. I think that I just happen to be very organized. I'm also, I want to make sure that if I am committing to someone that something will get done, that I do it and I meet those expectations. To me, that is reliability is one of the most important things in this industry. People remember that. People will have they will feel like they can count on you if you meet those expectations. I think women are built different.
Any hacks? Like, do you like pack all the lunches the night before?
I have two calendars. I have a work calendar. I have a home calendar. Everything goes on the calendar. Everything is color coded. Everybody in my family is on the calendar invite. My calendar is synced to the refrigerator so that the schedule is on the refrigerator. Everybody knows what is happening that day.
That's awesome. That's a great hack. That's good. I like it. What?
It's the Samsung Hub, and it has a very wide screen that you can even watch TV on it.
Everybody buying this refrigerator. So who would have thought buying the right refrigerator? You can't help you be or organized as a leader, but you just now shown us even making good decisions on refrigerators and appliances makes a difference.
You have to do what works for you. You have to know yourself and know what works for you.
That's good though, man. I'm gonna be researching that refrigerator after this. All right. What are some of the things that should be avoided while trying to move up in your career?
Definitely don't burn any bridges. This industry, as I'm sure you're aware, is very small. New York is, we have so many buildings, so many different owners, managers, but we all interact with each other at one point or another. It's really important to recognize that we're not perfect. We all make mistakes. We should always remember that, always treat each other with respect, help support each other, especially women should support other women. But, burning bridges is never a good thing. I know everybody has issues at work, issues at home. Sometimes we are not our best self, but we always have to remember to stay grounded, be professional, treat people with respect, and you could deal with the issues later. Because every problem has a solution. Don't burn those bridges.
No, that's good. That's very good. And because it's very hard and you never know. Sometimes you turn around and somebody who you thought you'd never see again is the person who you need to throw your name in the hat to get that next role. You never know, especially in this industry. It is so small. So that's great advice. When thinking about someone, and their trajectory to leadership and they have a goal, what is your roadmap for how long someone should stay in a position or a role before looking to take the next step? Is it, and is it a rule of thumb of, is it a matter of experience? Is it a matter of time? Is it a blend? Because, someone could walk into a building, you can learn the ins and outs of that building in 6 months. If you really apply yourself, 6 months, you can be the pro of that building. But, if you're saying, okay, now I want to be the director, that might not go so well. So what do you think when to give people a better perspective on when is the right time to start looking and to start asking and to start searching for that next step up from where you are?
So this is a really interesting question, because when I first started in the industry, it was all about loyalty. How long have you been with a company really mattered. And I feel like things have changed a lot with especially the new generation, where you see somebody at a job for 1 year or 2 years, and then they're just changing jobs constantly. And as a person who interviews a lot and reviews a lot of resumes, I've seen that change over time. You just don't see people at a place for 10 years anymore. It's very hard to find. But as I have progressed in my career, there's always a question about a resume. There's always a question about, well, why were you here for 2 years and then here for 2 years and then here for 1 year? Why so much jumping around? And then I've also seen the flip side where people are asking, well, why were you there as an assistant property manager for 10 years? Does that mean that you couldn't cut it as a property manager? So I feel like those questions are always going to be asked. You just have to be prepared to answer them. So I don't think there's one set rule or formula to how long you should or shouldn't stay at a job. I do, however, think that it's very important to set goals, right? Wherever you are in your career, you have to ask yourself, what do I need to do or learn to get to the next step? Then the next step is your goal. So however long it takes you to gain that knowledge and that skill set, once you've attained it, achieved it, you feel comfortable enough to move on, that's really when you should say to yourself, I should start looking if this employer is not willing to give me an opportunity or there is no opportunity. You always have to kind of reevaluate where you are and where you're going and how do you want to get there.
Yeah. And what you started out with, I know I found myself in those situations and I know a lot of other people looking for jobs, they find themselves in those situations. It's incredibly frustrating where it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You're like, well, which one do you have then? And all of them are reasons to kick you out and to never give you the opportunity because, well, I was here for this long and maybe, there's reasons behind all of it. And unfortunately, I feel women are typically kept in lower roles for longer periods of time and then they have to explain themselves. This is what, and we have to do it in a positive way in an interview. And it's really difficult to do, right? It's difficult to spit there. So I'm glad that you touched on it. It was really, really good. How do you look for the next step up role without alienating or ruining the relationship with your direct supervisors? And this is a really hot question because, like you said, this is a really small industry and everybody talks. So even if you're doing something like, I'll go get lunch with somebody, right? Somehow you come back and the whole office knew that you just had lunch with somebody from another portfolio. And it makes it a little vulnerable for people to really actively look because they're afraid that it may impact the relationship and where they are right now. It could fracture the security of the job that they have right now. And so I think a lot of women, especially women who have families and mortgages, they're a little more fearful to go out there and look because this industry is so cloistered, because everybody is talking. How do you recommend for people to look in a way that doesn't burn the bridge, that keeps the integrity of senior leaders or direct managers? And even this one's like really a little interesting is what if like you have not a great manager who isn't a good person and you're kind of like, I gotta get out of here. But how do you do it in a good way, right? Like what is the rule of thumb in all those scenarios to be able to look for the next step, look for the next opportunity without it blowing things up?
Well, for me, I've always maintained relationships with people in the industry. We have so many networking events where you have the opportunity to have a quick chat with someone, establish a relationship, then schedule a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner or something. I think building that relationship starts there. It doesn't have to be very formal. It doesn't have to be an interview. It could just be a conversation. Hey, I'm looking to grow in my career. If you hear of anything, keep me in mind. It's just as simple as that. Or an email, a simple, it was great to meet you yesterday. Look, I've been in this industry for X amount of years. I'm ready to take on more responsibility. Keep me in mind.
Yeah.
Right. And just continuing to touch base and keep in touch with those people that, have exposure to these types of roles and opportunities. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you sit down with your manager and say, hey, I'm talking to everybody in the industry because I'm ready to move on. That probably wouldn't go very well. But,
That's
there's
important to say, and I don't want to cut you off, but for everyone who's tuning in, that is important to say. That's important intel that you're giving them because truly, some people may do that. They may sit there and say, I want to be transparent with you. I want to retain the relationship, only to find it might blow up in their face. So thank you. But sorry, I cut you off. Please continue.
No, it's fine. I think that is important to say, and you can have a really great relationship with your manager, but at the end of the day, they have a responsibility as a manager to certainly plan for the future and plan if you are no longer going to be there. They may have take this information and go to HR or go to their boss, or start thinking about a plan to replace you. And if you, especially people who think they're doing great at their role, but they're not, and then they expose themselves in this way, you're going to be faced with a very difficult and challenging results and outcome. So I would say, be as confidential as you can, even with other coworkers. I would say that you don't really know people's agenda. Be a little bit more private about these things, and be strategic about it. Obviously, if you do end up moving on to another role, you always want to maintain that relationship with your managers and with the company that you've been working for, and you want to leave on good terms. You should always give more than the standard time frame so that they can bring somebody in to transition. I know it's a lot, but I typically would give 3 to 4 weeks. I've even given multiple months of notice when I'm able to bake that into my new package, onboarding package. So, obviously these are all conversations you have to have, and you have to kind of weigh your options. But I would just say maintain those relationships in the industry. Make sure that you are cognizant and you're taking into consideration your company's needs, because you want to leave on good terms. And just, don't share everything.
Like that. I like that. That isn't often shared when it comes to advice. And it is good advice as someone who has made that critical error too many times in her career. So thank you for sharing that. And the thing I also love about your answer for everyone who's watching, the key thing here was that you need to be out networking, right? In order to be able to open up opportunities, you have to be out networking. You have to make the time. I know, and especially for women, I know how hard it is for women inside of, the previous question, how are you balancing all of this, right? And it's exhausting. And then you have to also make time to go to these networking events. And as someone who is throwing them 1 to 2 times a year myself, the reason why I do it is because I know what it's like to have not done it. And I know the pain involved behind. I do everything based off of a long list of mistakes. I'm trying to help people. Don't make my
How we learn. We learn from mistakes.
I don't mean them all, but that was a big one. That was a really big one. And I think that is a very critical factor. And I think how you put it, where it lubricates the circumstances. So then when you are meeting up with this person or that person, it's not unusual to your company or to a manager. It's very commonplace for you to do that. So you almost want to set almost like a branding optics around yourself. If I go to the networking events, I meet the people, I become friends, I go to the lunches. That's what I do in order to, sidestep some of the bad optics of you're going out to lunch looking for another job. It can look a little more, I think, graceful in the way that you presented it. And I really like that.
And that's a really good opportunity for you to also know if anybody else is out on the market, and you need to hire a senior property manager or a tenant coordinator or assistant manager, or even, your engineering team. These meetings, these networking events, that's when you really know who's moving where and why, and who's available, and so it's important to have these conversations and to network, because it will help you with your own staffing needs.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Number 9, this was really good. And this is what you touched upon in the beginning of our interview. Too often companies want to keep women in the role they're succeeding in and never move them up. Selfishly, they don't want to lose this ability of an example of a building running perfectly and change people around and move them up, and then have a building no longer running like a top. So how can you approach a company to tap or to consider you for a leadership role? How do you get them to notice you and start to change their view of you in one role and start to see your ability in a new leadership role? Because again, I think this is across many industries, but I think in commercial real estate and in property management, it actually deepens and concentrates in some of the issues. Because if you have someone who's doing that great job, who's running that asset beautifully, it is in every leadership's intentions, from the landlords to the directors to the portfolio heads, to keep that person there, because it's making them look good. It's making everybody make the most money. But unfortunately, the rub is you do an excellent job, and oftentimes the company's not like, yay, now let's move you up, because now they're afraid I'm going to lose all of the stability, the income, because not you is a risk, right? Anything other than what is known factually is that's going to deliver is an unknown and is a risk. And we find that oftentimes traps a lot of really incredible leadership women from moving up. And so, what can women do when they find themselves in those situations? And again, I think that in this industry, that the deck is stacked a little bit against most people in this role, because everything says don't move that person, right? So how can someone do that?
So I can tell you from experience, this has happened to me in my career. And I can also tell you that it's happened to some of my cohorts. So it is something that we see in the industry quite often. I think you, as the person who this is happening to, has to identify it. One, that's the starting point. Identify it. Obviously, you're being kept in that role for a reason, because you're really good at it. You excel at it. So the company sees you and sees the fact that you are very productive, very capable. And when that becomes evident, I think it's time to have a conversation, right? This is when you have to approach it from a professional standpoint, from, you wanting to further your career, and have a candid conversation with your manager about where your career is going and what opportunities will the company provide for you or not. And always approach it in a professional way. But based on those conversations, then you can, determine whether staying with that company will achieve the outcome that you're hoping for, or whether it's time to start looking outside of the company. But first you have to identify. You have to make sure that you are in a good, you're in a good position within your company to be able to have that conversation, right? So after mid-year reviews and end year positive, exemplary reviews, then you can say, okay, I need to have this conversation, because what happens with a lot of women is that we're afraid to speak up. We have been accustomed to just tolerating things and keeping quiet just to maintain the peace. And I'll be honest, I used to be that way. When I first started in my career, I would always say, I'm just going to work really hard, and I'm going to get recognized for my hard work, and I'm going to get promoted because I'm doing the role of 3 people.
Right.
And why wouldn't they promote me, right? But the reality is that the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Right.
And if you are not having conversations about where you see your career and when you're ready to move on to a higher role, they're going to go with someone else. They're going to speak to the person who has already their interest in a promotion. So you do have to have these conversations.
Got it. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I also like the setting the tone of you've had exemplary reviews and having that be the key catalyst. Because I think that's helpful for a lot of women to be able to say, what's the trigger to be able to do it? What's the mechanism? What's the right timing? Because sometimes it's kind of like, do I just set up an appointment? But you're right. I think that's a great tool to put in your belt and say, these are the keys that I need, the leverage I need to be able to start having that conversation. And I do like the idea that it's not going to be once, right? What you said is squeaky wheel. Well, that means you're hearing the squeaks often. And that means it's not a one and done. It's not, I said it once and now that's it. It's not, I said it, they didn't give it to me and now I'm out, right? It is a process. It is not a transaction.
100%.
Yeah, that's good. That's really, really good. Next one. Have you ever been stuck? And it kind of speaks to where we're at. Stuck in a career situation where a gatekeeper was not allowing you the ability to move upward or outward. What did you do to find a way through? What general advice would you give other women on how to battle a gatekeeper and win?
I did have this happen in my career, very unexpectedly, actually. And, again, identifying is key. You have to be very aware of your surroundings and what's going on in your workplace and your environment. And I think what helped me is that I always set a goal. I always set in place a plan, and I'm very good about sticking to that plan and achieving that goal. So I think once you identify that this is actually happening to you, you almost have to maintain even more of a professional demeanor when you're interacting with that individual, because you already know that person's intentions don't necessarily coincide with what you want. And for me, it was important to set a goal of my time frame at that company. I set my goal and I knew that I only wanted to be there for 2 years and then leave. It's not a productive environment. It's very difficult to work with someone like that. And it stunts your growth and your career path. So, you have to make difficult decisions sometimes to further your career. But, it happens. So we have to be prepared for it.
Yeah, yeah, and, I've had a lot of women let me know that there seems to be a lot of gatekeepers out there, and I know I had a gatekeeper who not only made it difficult for me internally, but that gatekeeper also would then go external. So what
Oh, wow.
before I would show up to somebody else, that gatekeeper had already had a lunch or a phone call, and it was really no, like, you're just kinda like, "Wow, do you have that much time on your hands?" That's small of a human being. And it can be really stressful to figure out how to get through. And I know that it is an ongoing issue. So, and it sounds like what I really took from that is that you didn't sit there and say, I'm out of here in a month. I'm out of here in 2 months. I'm out of here in 6 months. I love the fact that you sat there and said, my plan is 2 years. And I want to highlight that because especially someone who's just entering into the workplace, I just don't think enough is discussed about the workplace and realistic expectations. Like when things are not ideal, and they're kind of crappy, I think that there is a younger generation where they're like, and I quit right away. Right. You go, what? Like that's not gonna serve you. And that I think that's the most important thing. We know that great managers can really bring so much to the table, and a bad manager can take so much off. But at the same time, you have to have a certain level of stick-to-itiveness inside of the uncomfortable situation and then find a path away and around or through or under.
It's so important to be able to withstand that kind of pressure and just negativity. It builds character. I'll be honest. And to your point, I feel like a lot of people, especially, the younger generation, they're less tolerant. It's not because they can't tolerate it. It's because I think they don't feel like they need to. But if they were to practice this more, I think they would surprise themselves and really, I think it would open their eyes to so many possibilities and opportunities, because it really helps you grow as an individual, and it makes you a better manager, makes you a better person when you have this experience.
For sure, for sure. Because, I know from that experience, and it's put a seed in me to try to help more people, right? And not be like that. And, I think for the younger generation, exactly what you said, where it's like they don't think that they need to. But at the end of the day, when you really look at the landscape of human beings, right? Some of them are not nice people. There's actually huge collections and they're never going to be nice. And you can't navigate in a world, and you certainly can't navigate in a leadership world with the type of philosophy where, well, the not nice ones, the difficult ones, the ones who are going to try to suppress me, well, I won't work with them. We don't get the choice. Like, it's just like a game of cards. Like, you get the hand that you're dealt, and the better you are at playing the hand is how you're going to succeed at that table. And the same thing happens for leaders. And so the younger generation, they don't understand. And I love that you have a timestamp on it. I love that you make a plan to get out. You don't stay in the circumstances. You work to get out there, but you do have to have a certain stick to itiveness. But at the same time, take the information, learn how to work and navigate and survive sometimes
Yeah.
person, because you're gonna need that later on too, because you're not gonna be able to, push the bail button over and over again and at least hope for a good career path.
Right. No, it's 100%. It's easier said than done, but it's achievable.
It is very hard as someone who has been through many, many uncomfortable situations. It's very hard. And I want to save as many from that as possible, but we can't help some of the broken, right? Some people just come broke. Just is what it is. So one of the things that have come up through the Women in Property Management Networking event, and we've been interviewing executive women, one of the most common themes that come up with how do you get to the top? How did you get the next leadership role? How did you get there? It was, they always talked about mentors, right? And everyone was like, a mentor helped me, a mentor. So it is definitely something I've identified is an absolute must. It's a necessity. It's not optional. You got to get it. You got to have it. You got to want it. So what are some of the traits that a mentor looks for in a young up and comer that would have them want to put that person under their wing? For those young, what are the traits like when you're saying I might know somebody, but what would you look for?
So I am blessed with the opportunity to mentor a handful of people, and what I think the qualities that I see in my mentees, they have a strong foundation. They know who they are and where they want to go in their career. They're not sitting around waiting for an opportunity to fall on their lap. They're working towards achieving certain skill and knowledge in order to move up in their career. They're not complacent. They work hard. They understand that they're not just going to get, to be a property manager or higher than a property manager by luck or by sitting around. And I think one of the key things that we all need to know, and I know you probably hear it a lot, is, working hard and being dedicated, showing up every day. It matters. It matters that you're responsive. It matters that you're reliable. And that, I would say, is one of the key skills and personality traits that I see in probably all of my mentees.
But repeat that. Reliable. That one, too often people don't understand it actually is work, to be a mentee. And you have to, on a mentee level, have a level of responsibility to be reliable, to be consistent. And I love the fact that what you look for is ambition, right? You want to put someone under your wing who really wants to be a mover and shaker and wants to get out there. And that's really commendable, because not everybody looks for that. Some people just want a different vibe, but that is the hardest kind of person to help, because that's the hardest journey. Going up is harder than just staying, on a plan, That's good. That's good. And this is the last question. What are some good characteristics a mentee should look for or have in a mentor-mentee relationship? Like, so set a tone for the mentees of what should they be looking for? What are the good characteristics that they should be looking for when looking for a mentor? And what is the good kind of relationship that they should anticipate to have with the two together?
So I would say something that really helped me in my career was, so I didn't necessarily have one person that was my mentee or my mentor, I should say. I took my mentor's strengths. So I would have several mentors with different strengths, and I would tap on them depending on, what I knew they were really good at, because you surround yourself with people that you want to be like, right? You want to achieve and attain those things. You surround yourself with people like that, and they will teach you. They will guide you. They will give you advice. You don't always have to take their advice, but it's good to learn from them and their experiences. So I would say that you should try and have a handful of people that you can reach out to that have experience in leasing and construction and engineering and operations and finance. It's good to be well-rounded, right? Life is all about a balance, right? we can't be one way or another. We have to be somewhere in the middle. And having that balance, having the different skill sets in all different areas of real estate is key. So having mentors that also are well rounded is very important.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Because what it paints a picture for me is when it comes to mentors, because I think a lot of people look at it in that traditional sense where you develop a relationship with one person, maybe two people, you check in, you help each other, you get advice, you go to lunch, etc. And it becomes, like, almost like a friendship. But the way you approach it is I have a board. I have a board that I like to have relationships with. And each person on my board, they're on my board because they are good at something specific. And it may not even be something construction, it may just be like the strength that this person has is they can make a phone call and find solutions for XYZ. And you have created more of a board, a collection of people, and you've identified in each one of them strengths and weaknesses. Because sometimes when we think about a mentor, we never think of that they could have weaknesses, right? We never think, well, because we're thinking they're senior, they've got all the answers, right? But that's not.
No one has all the answers.
And sometimes, I've had phenomenal mentors. I've had incredible people who have taken me under their wings over my entire career. And sometimes they were wrong. Sometimes they were dead wrong. It is difficult to manage that. I have to be honest with you, everybody. It's difficult to say no. It's difficult to not take their advice. It's difficult, and sometimes that does compromise relationships. They say, don't do this, whatever you do. And you're kind of like, I think you might not be right here. And so still somehow rebound the relationship. It's tricky because some people, when they say don't do it, they expect you not to do it. But you have to be able to weigh all the information you have. They're coming from their viewpoint, and maybe what they're talking about, to your point, may not be their strength, right? Their strengths could be elsewhere, and what they're leaning in on and what they're giving advice for it might not apply in a constructive way to this particular scenario for a solution, what have you. And I love that. Because I don't think most people look at relationships that way, don't look at a mentor that way, because you can have something more informal in a concept of, I've got a board. My board are all these people. And I call this person for this issue. I call this person for this issue. But for anyone who's younger, please know what Carolina is recommending involves a lot more work to match. It's not a bad thing. It's actually incredibly smart to have that many good relationships, to have a board instead of a handful of mentors, and have the board really see you as a mentee kind of relationship. But I really love that because it really brings so much strength to someone's career, strength to their mind, strength to their execution of their daily job. So that is beautiful advice. And this is our last question, but I'll leave you with this. When people ask me, as someone who is, I've got many boards, thank God, right? I have many boards based off of what you have. And the one thing I can tell any person who's looking for a mentor, the number one thing is you have to look for someone who shows up. Someone who's going to show up. And some of the ways to also know if somebody is a good option is if you're going to networking events and they're showing up there. They're showing up to the events, this event, that event. And they don't have to be. They already know everybody. They're showing up because what that's saying is when you show up, I actually care. And I'm willing to give time. I'm willing to help. When people don't show up, it says that they are not looking for outreach. They're not looking to give. They're not wanting to, they're depleted, right? And it doesn't mean that there's anything negative. It just means their bank reserve is empty. They don't have anything to give. But the people who show up and continue to show up and continue to show up and have the lunch and have the call, that's one of the key things to look for in a mentor. And I say this because, Carolina, you are showing up. You're showing up today. You're showing up for all of the women. You're giving your experience. And this is one of the key things to look for, not only in a mentor, but in a leader. And I just want to thank you so much for giving us this time, for giving us this advice. And thank you for just showing up and getting on this call and other calls with me. I know how hard it is and what a sacrifice it is. And I know that this is a labor of love. And I just want to acknowledge you and recognize you and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I look forward to so many women learning so much from what you've shared today. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. I honestly, I this experience has been great. I really enjoyed having this discussion because I feel like we need to expose other women to the realities of what goes on in our lives and our careers and our, everything, right? I just want to end this by saying that when I started my career, I didn't have someone that I can turn to. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have someone give me the leg up. I started as a property administrator 22 years ago, and now I'm overseeing a portfolio for property management and construction. And I pledged to myself when I started this career that I would help as many women as I could and devote my time to any mentees that wanted my help. And I can, honestly say that 22 years later, I have helped as many people as I could, and I will continue to do that because I think it's important. It's important to give back, and it's important to recognize that even though you didn't necessarily have it easy in your career, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't help others. So I just want to end this with that. I want to thank you for your time, for allowing me the opportunity and the platform. And, I look forward to the upcoming events and networks. So we will definitely see each other again. So thank you, Alicia.
Thank you so much.